Hello again. Welcome back to my music room. This is a video again for the older and more advanced pupils, and it's also useful or might be interesting to musicians generally and to adults and others. I'm going to do a session now on the circle of fifths, which again takes us historically way back to 500 BC or thereabouts with Pythagoras. He was a great musician, great mathematician, and he was very interested in the science of things that went on. As I explained in my other video about the harmonic series, which is something that interested him, he actually applied it to the musical sounds. So he had a 0 at the top, the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So he had 12 segments, and in each one there were 5 subsegments. Exactly the same as a modern day clock. So if you start with a note C, and you go C, D, E, F, G, that takes you to that perfect fifth that we spoke about in the previous video. And that perfect fifth, if tuned beautifully so that the mathematical relationship between the two notes is 2 to 3, you get a pure, perfect fifth. You can then take your G, A, B, C, D, and the D gives you the next perfect fifth from the G, so that can be tuned pure. And so it goes all around the circle so that all the notes are absolutely perfectly in tune. However, it doesn't quite work like that. Let me start the journey in a different place. I'm going to start here at the bottom with the G flat. So G flat, if you start on a G flat and you take a perfect fifth round, G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, you get the D flat. You get your D flat in tune, D don't give you A flat. Make your A flat perfectly in tune. Remember the mathematical relationship, 2 to 3. Make the fifth pure. Gives you the E flat. The E flat gives you the B flat. B flat gives you F. F gives you C. C gives you G. G gives you D. D gives you A. A gives you E. E gives you B. B gives you F sharp. So you are back where you started at the G flat. But actually you're not. If you make every fifth perfect, when you get back to this F sharp here, it will be a tiny amount out of tune, an ear-gratingly close amount, because the whole system doesn't work when you go all the way around it. So we have to do something about that. That's been an issue for music and for musicians for centuries. So if you make all the fifths perfect all the way around, it doesn't add up when you get to the end. It doesn't matter where you start. You can start with C and go all the way around that way. If you make every fifth perfect, it doesn't add up when you get to the end. When a piano tuner tunes a piano, he uses the octaves and the fifths to tune the notes. When he gets the fifths, he tweaks each one a tiny bit flat to make it all add up so that it doesn't overshoot when you get to the last few notes. So just as a matter of interest, the piano as an instrument, it's impossible for it to be in tune perfectly with itself. And the same goes for any and all fixed pitch instruments. When we play other instruments, violins, trombones, anything else at all, you can make those minuscule adjustments just by the wind pressure, the bow pressure, the fingers, anything. And just the way you blow it or strum it or whatever, that can be done easily, automatically, provided you listen to what you're playing and you pay attention to what you're playing and make it sound nice. Without realizing it, you will be making those tiny adjustments. But it's just good to be aware that anything that's fixed pitch will be out of tune with itself. That includes pianos, organs, any keyboard instrument, electronic tuning devices. They cannot be in tune with themselves because they're based on fixed pitch. The very best, for me, the very best tuning device of all is a tuning fork and a human ear. So let's go back into music history and see how they coped with all this issue of the perfect fifth being not quite in tune. If you go all the way back to medieval times, they had a hexachordal system. They started on a G in the bass, Dave, and they went do, re, mi, fa, sol. In fact, it was ut, re, mi, fa, sol. And then from the D, they went to the C and went ut, re, mi, fa, sol. Then the F, ut, re, mi, fa, sol. And they had that hexachord, the 6-note system, on each of the C, F, and G notes. And what they did to communicate it, they used the hand. It's called the Guidonian hand. So if you Google Guidonian hand, you'll see pictures of it. And they use the joints on the fingers to indicate the sound. This was an early way of music literacy taking place. And it was very radical at the time. So the lowest note, the G, was a G, ut. And then the re, a, then the mi, b. And so it went on, and they used all the joints around the hand. They had a problem when they got to here, because this was also an ut, G. So they had to carry on. They had to find something different for this first ut. So instead of calling it the G ut, they called it the gamma ut. Now that developed the use of the word gamma ut meant the whole system. And that gradually evolved into the word the whole gamut, which is the derivation of the word the gamut, meaning the whole of everything. So that's what they had. They had that system based on G, C, and F. So, looking as things were back in medieval times, that's what they used. That was above there. Those 3 keys were the only ones they used. It could all be perfectly in tune, and it was fine. Then music developed further. In those days, of course, it was virtually all unison sounds only. Then you had the monks with their singing and things. You had lots of fifths and sounds in that. Then as music developed further and you got into the Baroque era, we had all these orchestras in around Europe, normally under the patronage of a very wealthy nobleman. And they had the centre of the orchestra was the harpsichord. But of course, they'd now broken out of this basic system here, and they were using more key signatures. They were using up to 3 flats or 3 sharps. They'd use all those keys. Very occasionally you can find an occasional piece in these keys, but nearly all that. So what they would do, the harpsichord player would decide the note, then he would tune out with the fifths as far as he needed to go to make it all sound pure. Of course, music was very much involved in the church. The concept of the vibrations was, of course, the whole thing was part of the world, which was developed by the Almighty. So they had to make sure that everything was as perfect as it could be in the church. They knew about the perfect fifth, and they made sure that the vibrations added up in praise of the main architect who designed the entire of everything. That was fine, but then as you got into the Romantic era, when suddenly you wanted to go to all these keys as well, there was a problem. Because that concept of the fifths not marrying up, not adding up, was there, and you had to do something about it. So what they would do, they had different ways of cheating with it. They kept most of the fifths fine, and then some of the other fifths made a bit smaller, a bit bigger, or whatever. And there's different tunings. There's Bach 44 comma tuning. If you look at it, you'll find lots of them. There was a little book entitled Tempered Tuning, How It Ruined Harmony and Why We Should Care, by Robert Duffin. It's an American author. Very interesting, a little coffee table book. You'll get it online for less than 10 quid. And it just goes through all this sort of stuff. And it's very interesting for any musician. Anyway, so they had this problem of marrying it all together. So what they did, they agreed that certain notes, certain fifths would be wider than others, just to make it all add up. And there was one chap, but of course what happened around this time, you're around the time of Bach now, is that every time they changed key, the harpsichord player would retune, and everybody would retune to that. And then one man wrote one series of pieces to be played at one sitting at the harpsichord without changing tuning. And that was a major radical piece of music. The concept of playing 48 pieces all in one sitting without retuning was a major issue, which all the other harpsichord players had to come to terms with. I'll just play you the opening bit of Prelude number 1. If you Google Prelude number 1 from the 48 Preludes and Fugues by Bach, that will come up on YouTube, I'm sure. So Bach wrote 48 Preludes and Fugues, one in each key, to prove the new key system that he was using. We can't be certain what it was, but it was one of these cheating systems so that it did make it all work. Nowadays, we tend to use tempered tuning for fixed pitch instruments. So we know that all the fixed pitch instruments are not quite in tune, but they're close enough. We get used to that as a modern ear. We're used to those sounds as they are. But without tempered tuning on the other instruments, it sounds much better if you use pure tuning, particularly for unaccompanied singing. That's one of the reasons that unaccompanied singing is so important. And it's also very important not to overuse the piano. Of course, we do use the piano, but we must keep in mind as musicians and teachers that the piano is using tempered tuning, which is not quite perfect. I hope you find that one interesting. I hope you get that little book, it's Tempered Tuning, How It Ruined Harmony and Why We Should Care by Robert Duffin. Very interesting, and it certainly helps people to think about how you produce your music at whatever level you're working at. So as I say, this little video here was mainly for our more advanced pupils. I hope you find that interesting and you take that with you as you go through life, making music as you go. Keep singing, keep happy, most of all, keep safe. Bye-bye for now.